Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, April 15, 2025 study session of the Olympia City Council. For the record, we have a quorum with council members Green and Vanderpool excused tonight. So we will move on to our first item on our agenda, which is item 2A, the Olympia 2045 Comprehensive Plan Update Progress Report. And we have Joyce here, Joyce Phillips, who is the Long Range Planning Manager with our Community Planning and Development Department, to give us a presentation. Good to see you, Joyce.
Thanks. Good to see you too. Well, thank you, Mayor Payne and council members. For the record, I'm Joyce Phillips in Community Planning and Economic Development. I'm very excited to be here tonight to give you an update and a quick overview of the Olympia 2045 Comprehensive Plan periodic update process. That's a mouthful, but I'm really excited to share our progress, and I've updated this slide, a few of the slides even since you got them last week, because we're just making good progress. So, and then of course after this we'll be sharing a couple of the chapters for a little bit of a deeper dive. So, just as a refresher, our new comprehensive plan will have 12 chapters. We're adding a housing chapter and a climate action and resilience chapter. And we also have an introduction chapter that doesn't get counted, but includes a lot of great information. Each of the chapters is based on our community values and vision. And the chapters are, by design, consistent with the requirements of the Growth Management Act and with each other, so that we can make sure all of the chapters are helping us work towards that vision of implementing our comprehensive plan. So we are doing a chapter-by-chapter review, and this is a little bit of a refresher for you. And each of the chapters is going through a slightly different process, but all of them are being drafted with opportunities for public comment and input. All of them are having briefings with our advisory committees and a public hearing before the Planning Commission, and ultimately each chapter will come to the City Council for review and acceptance. And we're going to put a little pause on it after that point, and we'll bring back all of the chapters for adoption at the end of the process. There will be some revisions to our development regulations to ensure we're staying consistent with the Growth Management Act and our comprehensive plan as well. And we are also in the midst of preparing an environmental impact statement, which should be released in the next couple of weeks, 3 or 4 maybe at the outside. So that's exciting. And we do have various staff from across the city departments working on the particular chapters, depending on their topic and expertise. So that's exciting, and we are making great progress. Each chapter does go to the Planning Commission and the Social Justice and Equity Commission. And then we've actually had the opportunity to take some of the chapters to the newly formed Youth Council, which has been a lot of fun for staff, and I hope for the Youth Council members as well. Ultimately, each chapter will go through the public hearing process with the Planning Commission, and the Commission will issue a recommendation letter for Council's review and consideration. Once we do have the EIS complete, though, we will plan on bringing back the full plan after it's been reviewed for consistency and a little bit of proofing, perhaps, but we'll bring that back for final adoption. And technically, it's due by the end of the year, so we do have a little hustling to do, and it is happening. So, this slide really just shows the main processing steps that each chapter is going through. Each chapter is a little bit different, but these are the ones that are consistent. There is a public process to develop and review the draft. The advisory committees that are appropriate to the topic are being asked for input. They are all going to the Planning Commission and Social Justice and Equity Commission for briefings. The Planning Commission is conducting the public hearing. The Squaxin Island Tribal Council has the opportunity to review and provide council-to-council input and comments on the chapters that they've indicated they're interested in. And we're also offering to take each individual chapter to various council committees for input before bringing chapters to the full council for a study session. And then, of course, we'll be bringing them to council during regular business meetings, asking for acceptance. This is the slide that I really wanted to show. And I apologize that it's small text, but this is what we've been using for tracking our progress. And even just today, I got to fill in some of the boxes a little bit more. So I'm like giddy to share this with you tonight. But it's the major steps for each of our chapters. And your Olympia 2045 team is really working hard to ensure that we can adopt the full plan by the end of the year. So all but 3 of the chapters have been released, and then the next 3 draft chapters will be issued soon. Land use and urban design this month. Housing and the climate chapters are both anticipated next month, early next month. So on this particular slide, the dark teal boxes are items that have been completed. Light green represents partial steps have been taken or something is scheduled to occur in the future, but it hasn't happened yet. So I'm very excited that the first half of the table on the left-hand side is filled in with at least some shade of green or teal, but we are making progress, and you will start to see this perhaps in more study sessions, and it will continue to be filled in as we get closer and closer to the adoption process. I could stare at this all night, but I will advance it. It's so exciting. So that's all I had for the introduction overview of the status. I'm happy to go back to any of the slides and answer any questions about how we're proceeding.
Any questions from council? Seeing none. All right. Thanks, Joyce. And we'll see you back for item 2C on our agenda. So next we'll move on to 2B, which is the Olympia 2045 Public Participation and Partners chapter of the Comprehensive Plan update. And and we have David Ginther, our senior planner, presenting on this item tonight. Good to see you, David.
Good evening. My name is Dave Ginther. I'm Senior Planner with Community Planning and Economic Development, and as was just summarized for you, I'm here to talk about the Public Participation and Partners chapter for tonight. Just to give a very brief overall summary of the main points of this chapter, if you can really boil it down to 3 bullet points, this is what I believe they would be. Is that public participation opportunities are very valued by the community here. As I've witnessed over the course of a few years with public participation opportunities with a number of projects I've worked on, especially Capital Mall Triangle. We went out of our way to make sure the community had as many of the opportunities as possible, and I think that resulted in a much better plan. And the planning effort was much more successful than otherwise. All community members have a role. We like to get, not just like, it's very necessary to get a broad range of ideas and input from all aspects of the community. And then the last part is the collaboration, partnerships, and public participation. Those are essential for making our community a better place. And that's really one of the main ideas of this chapter. We did a survey for this chapter. It was online. And we actually had a really good turnout for it. We had about 95 participants. And the overall 2 messages that I got from the results of that are overall, and I stress it, overall, people thought that the goals and policies in this chapter were in pretty good shape. Some people felt that there could be some changes to them, but overall they liked them. However, it was fairly obvious from the comments and the results of the survey that people would like to know more about how we're getting to our goals, the implementation status of actions and programs, and they also wanted us to highlight our successes. So they really wanted us to report back to them. Here's just one example of a change that was made based on public comment from the survey. Like the last thing I just mentioned about how well we are achieving our engagement goals. So that's an existing policy with some additions to it based on public comment. I did want to note that there are multiple other policies that also support reporting back. So the plan does have a significant amount of guidance and policies to drive the city to report back, but we've enhanced that based on the public comment. Social Justice and Equity Commission did review this. They had some really good comments and insight based on their unique experiences. The first one here is the outreach to young persons they felt was important, and you might see that again on another slide when I talk about the Youth Council. They also felt very strongly that outreach methods are not blanket or universal. They really need to be tailored so that you can reach a broad variety of community members. They specifically did say some people only respond to a mailed paper. Some people only really deal with email or social media notices. So they wanted to make sure that we continue to strive to use a broad range of outreach efforts. And then the photos in the chapter, this was challenging to find photos that would satisfy this concern, is that they wanted a greater community representation, more diversity in the photos. And that also came from the Youth Council, which I'll mention in a minute too. There are a number of changes based on the social justice and equity comments. We updated sections on outreach to communities. They especially wanted the term communities on the front line, and the overburdened and vulnerable mention here is actually a result of a comment from the state Washington Department of Commerce. So we combine those, and we think it covers most of the bases of the concerns that were voiced in the comments. There is a new photo of the Squaxin Island tribal members performing the ceremony at Squaxin Park. And there's a new section describing the accord between the Squaxin Island tribe and the city as well. Throughout the chapter, we've tried to introduce equity and inclusion as much as possible as well. And there are other supporting existing policies in there that are in line with the changes and the comments as a result of Social Justice and Equity Commission. The Youth Council, that was a lot of fun. It was great to see the youth of the community being engaged, interested. They had some really good questions. They did a thing where they did a breakout group and then came back and asked questions. Thought that was a really good technique for them to channel the questions that they had, rather than the other approach, which would just be the random question and answer. So again, just like social justice and equity mentioned, outreach to young persons, very important, because they want an opportunity to be involved, and they want to be informed as to what's going on. And then more pictures of youth and greater representation of that in the chapter. So I did find a great picture in our archives of youth attending a homeless response public meeting. So this is one of the possible changes. If you'd like, we can insert this into the chapter. The Youth Council was briefed after the Planning Commission public hearing. So that's why I'm suggesting if you wanted to make some changes based on their comments, I have some options for you here. We do have photos of youth in the chapter, but this would be an additional one, and it would be a much more recent picture. And a change to policy 2.1 as described here, basically to expand on community members, expand on how to make, or excuse me, expand on I'll just read it. Make information outreach materials available through a variety of means. That's the original language. And then the addition would be for all community members, including, but not limited to, youth, seniors, those with disability challenges, and underrepresented groups. We could go on and continue with that list, but those were the ones that came to mind as the first, and the including but not limited to, I really hope satisfies anybody that wants to continue with that list. If not, we could add to that list as well. So, But that's a potential change based on the social justice, or the Youth Council comments. There are a few other chapter
I'm sorry,
updates.
David.
Yes,
Just a moment. Could you go back a slide?
certainly.
I don't want to wordsmith right now, but I'm struggling with disability challenges. Accessibility challenges, or just simply disabilities might do. Just, yeah. I think just disabilities is okay. Just struggling with that a little bit. Yeah, thanks.
Got it.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. There are a few other updates to the chapter. The chapter is relatively short and in fairly good shape, so the main changes that I'm presenting here tonight were the ones from the committees and commissions. However, there's a few other things I do want to point out. We did add, based on public comment, a new policy about engagement with the recognized neighborhood associations. There's a section with policies on property rights and land use moratoriums. Those were taken out of here based on public comment, and it seemed to make sense as well. Move those to the land use and urban design chapter. There is a new policy on how the city responds to public input, and that was also based on public comments. And then there's a new policy, also based on public comment, about communication with sub-area representatives, and that would be active two-way communication. So there is a section on housing densities that seemed more appropriate to move into the new housing chapter, so that's where that's going to go. For some reason, the transfer of development rights and annexation were in this chapter. Those are more appropriate in the land use and urban design chapter, so that's where they're going to be moved. And then we did update the section on interjurisdictional partnerships to make sure that was up to date and complete. And just to give you a look at what the timeline of review and public process was for this, we started in June of 2023 with the very first briefing, Planning Commission. Continued throughout 2023, 2024, and I'm going to skip all the way down to the Planning Commission public hearing was in October of 2024. They did deliberations in November, and then we went to the Youth Council and Social Justice and Equity Commission was before that, excuse me. But the Olympia Youth Council was earlier this year, so, and that's where we're at. So here tonight for any feedback or questions you may have on this, and any revisions that you'd like to see on this. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Any questions or comments from council? Councilmember Madrone.
And just so everyone's aware, this is one that didn't stop in a committee on the way to the full council because, well, it touches all the committees. So, so we're all seeing it for the first time here. And I do have, and since it wasn't in committee, I have some thoughts that haven't been incorporated yet. So I was looking at, first of all, thank you for walking us through the whole process. One of the questions I had for you is, did this go to the Youth Council? And it did, so thank you for that. I noted that starting on page 3, there's, public outreach is essential, but it's also challenging, and it identifies, our population is more diverse, we're constrained by, how much we can do, both legally and physically, all that. And, then there's something on, people need to understand land use development processes. All of that I agree with. I think there's a couple of things that we should add to the list of challenges. One of that is that our community members don't always agree with one another. And so, how do we navigate disagreement that we see come through in the public participation? And then also adding something around barriers to participation that people have, whether it is because they are too busy or they don't know that it's going on, or, I'm not giving you like verbatim what I, want written in there, but happy to wordsmith things with you if you wanted that kind of support on that. But I think that those are a couple of challenges that would be really good to add there. I really like the section that was included around processes that are equitable and inclusive in response to what the Social Justice and Equity Commission requested. I had a question, well, maybe it's not a question, but maybe just opening something up of discussion with with my colleagues here, but PP 3.5, so this is the one that was added to be responsive to our code that says that we'll host forums with the CNA 4 times a year. We host 2, they host 2, and I wonder about making this a little bit broader, just as it's written in the comprehensive plan. So it's not just neighborhood associations that we're considering that for, but other organizations as well. So it could say partner with regional neighborhood associations and other organizations in the community. Because, I think that we want to recognize that, yes, there are the neighborhood associations and they bring a valuable perspective, but there's also people who aren't represented through those, and so just making sure that that's a equal opportunity. I noted for PP 4.2, is replace or complement the 3-minute one-way testimony format with an approach that allows meaningful dialogue, ... I just flagged that because a few years ago we changed it from 3 minutes to 2 minutes, except for public hearings. And so we either need to update that, or we could go back to 3 minutes, except at the discretion of the mayor when we have 50 people signing up. He's shaking his head at me, okay? Not a hill I'm gonna die on. Let's change that to 2 minutes. Yeah, and maybe not even, maybe just take out the 3-minute component, because for public hearings, it is 3 minutes. For public comment, it's 2 minutes, and so just take out the specificity around that. I also noted that PP 6.3, this is in accommodation of growth goal, but this one is about, it says work with Thurston County on its land use designations for unincorporated county areas within the UGB, urban growth area. So they will be compatible with the city's policies and development standards when they are annexed. I'd like for us to change that to if they are annexed. We are not obligated to annex UGAs. That's been a point of confusion among us, so just making sure that we're clear in our language in the comp plan, that that's a decision point for us, not necessarily an ultimate destination. Well, yeah, I guess the state could change the law around it. And just a couple of notes on photos in terms of I do like the one you got up there of Jesse leading through the the housing forum. I think we also have seen some photos up here from reimagining public safety process, civilian oversight of law enforcement process. I think we've very recently seen some more diverse photos that have come to us. I'd recommend taking out the ones from the 2014 process. Or keeping them in there and adding additional ones. It's nice to have that documentation of history. But I think that if you talk to Stacy Ray, you'll probably find some other pictures of some of the work group activities. And then I think I just got one more bit of feedback. And, in our surveys that we've been doing, we really have been striving to get information to match the demographics of our community in the surveys, the community surveys that we have done. And so I don't have the exact words for it, but I think somewhere in here we should have a goal that we are hearing from, that we are striving to hear from all demographics of our community in a way that's equitable. I don't know if Debbie can help wordsmith stuff since she's been so involved in those surveys, and making sure that as we at least do that part of it, we're here. The profile of the feedback we're getting matches the profile of our community. So I think that's all I got here, but if I think of something else, I will surely raise my hand.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Yeah, just wanted to respond to something that I think Councilmember Madrone had a question about, which was earlier on in your list of excellent recommendations. So it's PP 3.5. You were talking about let's broaden it, including recognized neighborhood associations, but also organizations. Can you talk a little bit about the types? Because what I want to add, I don't want to be overly specific, but I do want it to be. I think you're thinking of more than just professional associations, right? And so, so if we could add a little bit more specificity so that the intent is captured here, I think that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, more specific than community organizations.
Yeah, I mean, the idea, so as you were talking about it, the idea is that not every, so we want to respect the recognized neighborhood associations and then also realize that that's not the full scope of resident voice, right?
Correct.
And so I wouldn't want it, let's see, sometimes you might experience that there's, seems like there's a back and forth between what the recognized neighborhood associations think and say, oh, I don't know, a business association. So I just want to make sure that that the intent behind it doesn't get lost. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I guess, business organizations are a community organization. But I was thinking more like, if all of our homeless response nonprofits needed to have some kind of community forum, around something, and we're supporting them in that. So that's an example. If some of our local organizations who are working on racial equity issues want to co-host something with the city and create a forum for the broader community, I was thinking more of those like community-based organizations like that who are, working in some really tough spaces and may need some city support for, broadening our audience on those issues. Does that help?
And I agree. So if we could just capture that with staff as community-based organizations sound great.
Any additional questions, comments? Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you. Just a couple. I guess I agree with everything Danny said. I think I would want to check in on the Growth Management Act and how strict it is around annexation before we change that word. Because I believe the intent is to annex unless you have a darn good reason, and financial is not a good one. So that's my read. I also am open to the suggested language shift in one of the goals that David showed up there. Now I don't remember was it 2.1? It was a couple slides back. You showed one specific language that is not in the draft in front of us, which this is okay with me with the change the mayor suggested around disabilities. But I do kind of wonder if it's if this is already caught somewhere else. Like, is there already in the equity chapter or in the preamble where we're kind of getting at this specific thing for every goal and policy, because you kind of open up a can of worms. And whether or not you need to have more of these kinds of descriptions of who's able to access things in more goals. I just asked that question for continuity of the document. There's equity statement or section, right? Yeah, thank you. She said there's no equity chapter. I'm sorry, that was me bundling things together. And then just one last thing, and I might not be very popular, but my read of this is there's a place on page 4 at the bottom where we start to talk about sub-area planning, and it lists the Council of Neighborhood Associations. And then when I go to page 7 and I read about sub-area planning, there's not a role for the Council of Neighborhood Associations. So my suggestion is that come out of that paragraph and go to the for more information section at the end of the chapter with a sentence about what the Council of Neighborhood Associations is and a link similar to what we have for our recognized neighborhood program in the back. I don't believe that they're a city organization, nor do I believe they have an official role in planning.
Councilmember Gilman.
Great. I appreciate everybody's comments. And first I'm going to respond because I would defend including the CNA in the, first I'm glad that we have put additional language around sub-area planning and the value of sub-area planning and describing it as neighborhood level planning. I think that's really useful. But I also have understood in the Northeast and the East Side efforts that the Council of Neighborhood Associations was the convener that got the multiple neighborhoods talking to each other about the idea of working with Joyce or other folks to start thinking about, because each of this, we've defined the sub-areas as larger than any individual neighborhood association in each of the instances we've planned. So again, it's not the end of the world one way or the other for me, but I do think they've been a valuable partner, and they do have a we will continue to discuss that, but we've had this, they've done political advocacy. There were also a creation of the council hosted at the fire station right from the beginning with a council member present at every meeting. So, there it is. Anyhow, I think I don't think it's a done deal to strike them out of there, but at least if in practice we're continuing to consult them, I think that's really important. I wanted to recognize the new language around making sure to communicate to impacted communities, and I have a hope. This is more aspirational than an edit, but I think we're kind of at version 2.0 of these public processes, which is we have a number of people who've come from impacted communities and are now spokespeople for those communities or are working in policy and planning because they were the ones who won the lottery and went to college and, off they go, right? So I don't want to confuse having a person who's from a historically excluded community at the table to be the same thing as consulting that community. I think there's more and more effort in different organizations about actually finding ways to have conversation with currently impacted people. And so I don't know, this may scaffold to that we have this better language now and we sort of redouble our efforts to not only find somebody who will speak for the folks who are in the mobile home courts on Martin Way, but to actually include their voices in decisions about the corridor planning, that sort of thing. And then my other, I appreciate that you added the PP 4.6 about striving to inform the community about how comments are considered and used in the decision making. But I'll say that's also one step away from the question I've asked after each of our big efforts, like the downtown strategy and the corridor planning. Is there anything changed, or in the missing middle, are there changes in the document that we voted on that were shaped because of public process? Did the community have, because at least according to makers in the projects that they helped lead, we were doing more informing the community that, look, there's this really cool best practice and we're going to implement it in Olympia. And so my preference would be that we're allowing more community input to actually shape and adjust the decisions we make around planning, especially at the sub-area planning level. But those are both aspirational things. I'm very grateful for the engagement of so many folks and your leadership and the language changes that have been made in the document. Appreciate it.
Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I have so many thoughts on what you'd shared. So as far as engaging the neighborhoods, I'm just going to call it, I see the recognized neighborhood associations, whether we land on keeping CNA or the Council of Neighborhood Associations. I really just want to lift up the recognized neighborhood associations. It's essentially, for those that might not know, the Council of Neighborhood Associations is all of the heads of the recognized neighborhood associations. Mm-hmm. And so with not every recognized neighborhood association leaders present at the Council of Neighborhood Associations. I better watch what I say tonight. Oh my goodness. So I really think that as long as we find a way to reach out to the recognized neighborhood associations and those broader groups of people, then the intent is coming across, right? And those are, again, broader groups of people. So I don't want to sideline the Council of Neighborhood Associations, but I really would, for me, our focus being on the recognized neighborhood associations. And then that, in part, would cover the Council of Neighborhood Associations and more. So that's my thoughts on that. And then, Councilmember Gilman, you were talking about basically making sure that we don't have these people that are like monolithic or oh, I'm just gonna use me for an example. Just because I'm sitting here doesn't mean and able to be in this privileged position, or if I was staff, but had the same demographics. I don't speak for the entire Asian community, right? I don't want to. It's too much on me. It'd be too much stress. So, and I don't have that full breadth of experiences. But what you were saying, actually hit on a conversation that Debbie Sullivan and I were having the other day about as we're talking about engagement, community engagement with the city, is making sure that we are reaching community groups that essentially, they're not people that interact with government much, right? And they don't, and so I forget the term that we ended up using. I don't know, but I think that's kind of so as we want to hit these different underrepresented groups or marginalized groups, but we also want to make sure that we're reaching people that don't traditionally, go to school for government or work in government or come and necessarily complain to government. So how are we getting more just kind of everyday people that are out in our community? Is that sort of making sense?
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I was hoping. And I just want to be clear that when I think about what Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen represents, I was thinking about people who went to high school in Thurston County.
Yeah.
I look at you and I think people who went to high school in Thurston County.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Councilmember Cooper. Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, was that it?
I just had one small one, and we don't have to circle or close the loop on this right now. Although Councilmember Cooper had brought up, well, there was sort of this kerfuffle where we, as a council, were at risk of getting ahead of the mayor calling on us here. Is that we were trying to figure out like where is that equity language? Not just what was recently incorporated, David, but there was some work a couple of years ago where it wasn't a standalone equity chapter, but there was some, equity statement in there, and that was served as an overall. So if we could point back to that, I really do appreciate Councilmember Cooper's what I understood as maybe concerns of not necessarily not supporting this language up here, but sometimes you get into a pickle when you start trying to start listing things, right? You're leaving someone out, and so how do we just kind of point back to that? And then we don't have different PP portions, whether it's in this chapter or throughout the plan, that are listing different groups of different people, different ways. So I would support just kind of pointing back to the main message. Thanks.
Councilmember Cooper.
Yeah, thanks to the Mayor Pro Tem for helping me with the way I was trying to say that. Yeah, I really was trying to say that if you put it in one place, you might have to write it again and again and again in a whole bunch of different places. So I appreciate that you cleared that up. When you were talking about your aspiration, maybe only Debbie Sullivan and I will remember, well, actually Joyce was around. The old General Government Committee spent a whole bunch of time working with the International Association for Public Participation, and it was about also making it clear to the public when they would have what kind of decision. It's listen and we're going to do, or listen and we are going to influence. And there's a whole continuum of that, and it's really well done. And so I would just say maybe there's a place to bring that in as for more information, or bring a policy around making it clear to people what kind of a decision it is in the moment. And I also appreciate where the mayor pro tem went, the same place I was trying to go. It's about the neighborhoods. If they happen to have a recognized neighborhood association, that's great. I think the Council of Neighborhoods is not what it was. And if it wants to be again, that would be great. But I think for right now, it's not a planning entity. And so that's why I was making that suggestion. But if that improves over time, that would be, give me some hope too.
Councilmember Gilman.
So, it's funny, Jim pulled up the IAP too, because the next thing I'd scrolled down to was to say, you know, when it was, when it was people who looked like me, who had all done the same master's degree, running public planning processes, this was a best practice. This was a best practice 15 years ago. But they lean very much towards a tell people model. And I believe that public facilitation and leadership has evolved a lot, especially since the George Floyd moment, and that the face of our leadership has changed. And I would urge that we look for emerging tools. Chicago did an astounding comp plan rewrite that leaned heavily on their parks, arts, and recreation to facilitate forums across the city, and said, we think that the community values have evolved enough and the people who are included at the table have changed enough that we shouldn't be editing the words on this document. We should be starting conceptually again and writing. And it was made pretty clear to me that we weren't doing something like that across these 3 years here. But I do think this particular part about whether the IAP2 is still the best tool in alignment with our values right now and with the direction we're trying to head in terms of including people, having more people belong and have a voice. I think we should consider that, because in other parts of my life, I'm watching rapidly evolving best practices for facilitation and public practice, or public participation.
Councilmember Madrone.
I feel like we recently got a presentation from Stacey Ray in terms of, it had to do with the Workers' Bill of Rights in terms of like the level of degree of engagement from the community. And so maybe even pulling some of the information that she's already got on a slide somewhere, because we're also innovators in that space. So, so that's something to draw on there. I wanted to speak in response to just, pointing to the community values and vision chapter, which is where the equity language is instead of this. The reason this is being put in is because young people said, we don't feel represented in this chapter and we want something specifically in there that in both images and text that shows that young people are free to engage in public participation. So I agree with the challenge. You start listing people, you're going to leave somebody off. I wonder about, there's this on page 3, there are several ways to participate in local government planning and decision-making in Olympia, and adding a bullet that say, like, youth have a very, I'm at a loss of the word I want, but they have their a unique opportunity to engage in city government through the youth council that was created in 2025. It was recently, and highlighting the specific opportunities for young people. So that way we're not worrying about a list, but we're also being responsive to that concern that they don't see themselves here. So that's a recommendation on how to make sure both those needs are met.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Comments? Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Just a short one. I'm not combating what you're saying. I appreciate that. You're standing up for the young people. I think they'd appreciate that too. But I hope over time it can be a learned thing, because I don't think that a bunch of young people are probably going to be looking at the comprehensive plan, right, just realistically. But also what happened was a bunch of young people got to review the comprehensive plan. So I think even if it's not explicit, like, that's what happened. And that's amazing. And so I think it's a new muscle, and we're learning how to work it. But anyways, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I do just want to point out that it does say including but not limited to. So I do think staff was thinking about that, that it's not, an exhaustive list, but there is more there. And I also think maybe there is a way to point to the value section of the comprehensive plan, kind of like a little nod as you read it. There's a way of kind of, I guess, referencing it or pointing to it without removing any of the language we have here. Thanks for adding, David, in your presentation about what was happening with annexation, because I wrote here, why strike language around details such as analyzing short and long-term impacts of annexation? So I appreciate knowing what happened to that. Okay, so there was something on page, yes, it was Councilmember Madrone had referenced it earlier, under the public outreach is essential on the bottom of page 3, but also challenging due to the following factors. In that third bullet there, it says residents, business owners, and local organizations need to understand the land use development process so they can be involved in a meaningful way. And when I saw the word need to, it didn't jump out at me that we were going to be doing anything about it, but it is further down. So I'm thinking that if we swap the language with where we added the language in the red, so shortly after the to address these challenges, we would move to the city strives to create clear, concise, and jargon-free information. I think that says what we intend to do about it. And so I think it would be preferable or better to put that sooner in the paragraph and swap and add the new language at the end of that current paragraph, if that makes sense. Because like I said, you have to read further down to see what we're going to do about that. Let's see. In terms of diversity of photos, I really appreciate this suggestion and recommendation. I am wondering, though, about how are we going to, when we talk about public engagement, how are we going to leverage the testimonials of those who are benefiting from or receiving city services? And where does it talk about that in this chapter? I think often the work that we do, part of the reason it's not known is because we're not really sharing the stories. We're not putting the faces of those who are benefiting from city services or utilizing our services out in front of us, right? Instead, it's us telling that story or that work. And so I think if we could find a way to articulate that that's something we want to work towards even more, is putting folks, out there to tell about, what kinds of engagement and interactions they're having with the city and how their lives are either affected by or improving as a result of working with or receiving services from the city. So those are just my initial thoughts, and you answered my annexation question, so that's it. Any additional questions or comments? Okay. So thanks, David. Hopefully we didn't give you too much homework. All right. So we will move on to our next item on our agenda, which is item 2C, which is Olympia 2045 Capital Facilities Goals and Policies of the Comprehensive Plan Update. And we have back Joyce Phillips, our long-range planning manager with Community Planning and Development, to present on this update.
Well, thank you. Happy to be back. Let's see. So today I wanted to bring forward the goals and policies for the capital facilities portion of our comprehensive plan. So our capital facilities plan is volume 2 of our comprehensive plan. And the goals and policies for the capital facilities plan are tucked into the 300-page document, often overlooked, but really good, and now we're proposing some improvements to it that I believe you will like. So let's walk through that. So just as a quick reminder, it is volume 2 of our comprehensive plan, and we do amend the CFP annually to include projects and estimated costs and funding sources and how we're going to pay for those projects. But the plan really does cover that same 20-year planning horizon, and it's primarily focused on the first 6 years as a financial plan. And we've updated all of that information annually, but we really haven't touched the goals or policies since 2014. And I've included the full set of the goals and policies in your packets. There are 4 goals and several policies with each goal to show how the city intends to meet the goal. What I'm excited about is when I took this particular draft chapter to the advisory committees, they pretty much had very similar comments. And that was actually really fun to see how our advisory committees, who often don't talk to each other, are sort of aligned on some of the same key issues. So the public hearing draft was based on comments that were received from the preliminary draft. We had a couple of public comments, and then we got comments from the Planning Commission, the Utilities Advisory Committee, and the Social Justice and Equity Commission. And again, they kind of all had comments in the same places, which made it easy to kind of revise the draft to address those comments. We also, because there were so few public comments, I only had 2. I had the opportunity to respond to each person and say, here is the revised draft. Here's where I think your comments are addressed. If you want an additional opportunity to weigh in on that, the public hearing is tentatively scheduled for this date. So that actually felt really good to be able to kind of circle back with folks on that. But the themes of the proposed changes were similar to the same types of things we're seeing in other chapters. They really wanted us to focus on better integrating environmental stewardship, to include and show that we were taking climate considerations into account, and that we were more broadly addressing equity and accessibility throughout the goals and policies. Another addition to the capital facilities plan, goals and policies, we have a lot of information in there about growth will pay for growth. We'll have general facilities charges. We'll look at impact fees. We had a lot of language around that, but now we have some language too that states sometimes the city will need to make strategic investments in infrastructure so that we can accomplish our housing and climate goals. And then there was a little additional information around, thinking long-term and making sure work that we do already behind the scenes, but just kind of stating it more clearly that we're going to be taking a look at things in a long-term view. We want to get the most impact for our dollars. We want to make sure that we are, like when we're doing a street proposal or street reconstruction, we're also making sure we upgrade all of the utilities at the same time. And we often used Phones Road as a great example of that type of work. The Social Justice and Equity Commission considered it on December 2nd. They had a few comments, and they didn't ask for any specific changes, but they were really about looking to ensure that accessibility is intentionally and specifically addressed in our plans, and that we're working to maintain accessibility in our infrastructure, things like sidewalks, and that we would strive to meet and exceed standards in alignment with our city values, even if state or federal standards may change. And then we did include language around equity and universal accessibility explicitly in our chapter goals to help emphasize that work. We held the public hearing in January. There was no public testimony and no additional public comments were received on the public hearing draft. And we did have unanimous recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission. They didn't specifically ask for any changes to the chapter, but they did make a comment that they have made in previous comment letters as well, and that's that implementation and outreach continue to have and enhance a strong commitment to equity and hearing from all community members, especially those who may be marginalized or have less opportunity to participate. And I think that's a theme, we're seeing consistently across all of the chapters. We took this particular chapter to the Land Use and Environment Committee, and the committee was supportive of the proposed revisions and the Planning Commission recommendation. They did have a few additional revisions that were suggested to help strengthen language around equity, ensuring that climate considerations for capital facilities include city buildings, and expanding text about city actions that support affordable housing developments. So revisions to address the topics raised by the Land Use and Environment Committee are included in the draft you have before you this evening, and I hope that they've been addressed adequately and appropriately. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions or feedback from the council members. Our next steps would be to come back to a regular council meeting for consideration and ask for acceptance. And or if you want to kick it back to the Land Use and Environment Committee for any additional revisions, you'll have to take that up with the chair of the Land Use and Environment Committee. But I really feel like this chapter is in pretty good shape, and we had consistency in the types of comments that we received. But I'm happy to help answer any questions or take any feedback. And that.
Yes, thanks, Joyce. Councilmember Gilman.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. Joyce, you've mentioned in your presentation, and each of the letters spoke to concerns about climate impacts, talking about sprawl and greenhouse gas emissions, but I don't see that this CFP chapter responded, other than saying that it would be a priority in evaluating projects. And it feels like that call is stronger than that. At this point, vehicle miles traveled are still increasing, the tonnage of our emissions are still increasing, and we can blame it on population increase, but we didn't set our goals on a sliding scale based on population. We set sort of absolute goals for reduction from a baseline. So I'm wondering if there's either a policy 1.7.5 that is to give priority unconsideration to anything that increases sprawl, creates larger lots, widens roads, increases vehicle miles traveled. I'm just wondering if there's a way to more actively address that interest in reaching our climate goals by saying that anything that exacerbates our emissions goes to the bottom of the pile.
As far as capital infrastructure?
Yes, primarily roads. I'm talking, well, I'm less concerned about our city operations, and that is a chunk of this, but frankly, changing to better light fixtures in all of our city buildings is a minimal impact compared to where we allow development or whether we accommodate additional vehicle miles traveled or additional trips. So if we're going to work, if we're going to be helpful to the climate chapter when we get to that, it seems like our transportation planners and our capital facilities plan should also be on, okay, what do we have, 11 years? We got to cut in half emissions. Let's just do it. So that's my 2 cents, is that I don't think that interest from each of the groups who reviewed this is reflected in the document.
If I may, thank you, Councilmember Gilman. I am excited about your comment. I think as you know, I'm new, and so I haven't had a chance so much to shape this chapter. But one thing that I think touches upon your interest is operationalizing a complete streets approach. You know, when you say deprioritize projects that generate 82, that can be challenging based on a myriad of compliance issues that we may be faced with, and that's a generalized statement. But I think that with every project, regardless of, you know, whether it's channelization, whether it's vehicular generating, the best that we can do is to make sure that it accommodates all users. And I think that there could be stronger language in there around complete streets. And because I think there's probably room for operationalizing that in each of our capital projects.
And I guess I appreciate that, and we've had years of working towards multimodal concurrency and complete street model, but I also think I'm talking about giving up level of service and street condition sort of standards that we have now, even if that risks federal funding, which used to be a thing.
Councilmember Madrone.
Yeah, I did want to highlight, you know, there's probably, so you're looking at where prioritization of projects are considered. And we could have something in there about what we're not going to prioritize, right? And also looking at policy 2.2 letter E, it says rework any capital projects that may result in maladaptation or interfere with environmentally sensitive areas, contribute to hazards, or exacerbate current climate vulnerabilities. So it maybe doesn't fully get at your point, but there is something in there that says that, you know, if something is going to send us down the wrong path in terms of our climate goals, we're going to rework those projects. So, yeah.
Mayor, may I just briefly ask a clarification? So as chair of land use, do you think in the next CFP that would prohibit any sort of road widening or car connections? Is that strong enough language?
I mean, when I look at our transportation master plan, I see a lot of exactly what Susan was talking about over there, and I think we'll see more of the complete street stuff in the transportation chapter for sure, because we looked at this at the same time that we looked at that one. It's hard, you know, it's hard to say because, you know, we have all of these chapters with all of this language and it's easy to overlook something because something else pops up as a priority. Ultimately, we approve the CFPs. So, you know, we get to decide whether or not a project moves its way to the top or not. Like I said before, we could also have language in here around what we're not going to prioritize and strengthen it to make a more solid point. I just want to make sure you saw that there is this component in here that says that we are going to rework projects that are not going to, that are going to get us further away from our climate goals.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any additional questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. I did just want to point out that I appreciate the addition of policy 4.5. Consider and address equity issues in the development of the master plans that identify capital projects needed to implement the comprehensive plan and develop equity-based metrics for use in identifying underserved areas so action can be taken to bring them to current standards. That's great because I don't know if this was intentional or not, but it is consistent with the language that is in our reparations resolution where we identify the capital's facilities plan in that specific resolution. It is called out. And so, yeah, the language here actually gets at the heart of it. And I just quickly looked up the resolution because I'm like, I'm pretty sure we mentioned a capital facilities plan, and I remember it being in there, and I believe it was Councilmember Vanderpool's addition to the resolution. So I just wanted to identify that and say that I appreciate it. So thank you. All right. Any additional questions or comments? Seeing none. Thank you so much, Joyce. And it never gets old to see you come back and see how excited you are about the comprehensive plan. Yes, Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. You just reminded me of a question I asked during this meeting, and I think it's good for the council to remember this, is every time we adopt the capital facilities plan, we can change these goals because it's that whole chapter, the whole volume 2. And so I think to Councilmember Gilman's point, keep that in mind, because part of the sentence you just read is in conflict with what he was saying, right? If you bring it up to current standard might be not what we want from an environmental perspective, right? And so I think those conversations need to keep going as we evolve into what the climate work really means in our own facilities.
Sure, yeah, thanks for pointing that out. That is a great point. Current standards doesn't mean the best standards. Yeah, so that's great. Thanks for making that connection. Also, I just wanted to say I appreciated the focus on existing buildings for this as well, because I know that's a steep hill we have to climb, and we're not totally sure how we're getting there, but we know we need to, so I just appreciate that. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
I think of the Heritage Commission, and Heritage Commissioners always tell me that the most sustainable building is a building that's already there.
Well, on that note, all right, well, this concludes all of our business items for the study session tonight. So council will recess for 5 minutes, after which we will reconvene in room 423 for up to 120 minutes for an executive session pursuant to a personnel matter. No decisions will be made. And after that executive session, we will be adjourned for tonight.